There's a lot of depth to the question because, like even the concept of ownership, you go into it, and I'm not a legal scholar, but I guarantee that if you go into a law library and you'll probably have tomes and tomes and tomes on what it means to own something. In the context of crypto assets, I think there's a bit of a blurring between the concept of possession and ownership, in a sense that the closest thing you could describe it as is a bearer asset. So it's like if you own it, if you control it, you own it. And controlling a digital asset in general takes the form of having a private key. So you have a secret sequence of number not only you know, or maybe you don't know it, but it's written down somewhere, hopefully on a secure computer or in a vault. You know that, and that lets you control what happens to the digital assets. And in some sense, is that ownership? Well, it's close to ownership, but let's say that I walk you over the head and I steal your numbers, right? Do I own the assets? Well, not really. I took possession of them. I don't really own them, not legally mine. So what it means to own something is fundamentally a legal question, and that's and we could swim into this for ages. And I would say a lot of crypto assets are money and were created to be money, and that's the origin of assets like Bitcoin, for example, or like Tezos, which are cryptocurrencies. But of course, we've seen also other digital assets which aren't really intended to be money, and for example, NFTs, which are intended to be collectibles, unique collectibles, which are not fungible like money. They're not meant to be used as a means of exchange or as a store of value. Necessarily, they're used to represent something unique. The concept of ownership is really socially constructed. Like what it means to own something. Well, if everyone agrees that I own something, I own it. And then you have the concept of possession, which is a lot more, I would say, clear cut. Right? Do I control something or do I not control it? And the two can be in tension. I could control something and then no one agrees I own it, or I could own something but not really have control of it. So what the blockchain does is that it records ownership. It's a big distributed database system which is going to tell people, all right, this key controls this asset and this key controls that asset, and so on and so forth. Like a ledger. The difference with traditional databases and traditional ledger is that it works in a decentralized manner, in a sense, as no one has control over that, the content of that ledger. The ledger can only be edited by the people who actually own the asset or who have control of these assets. So it's not entrusted to anyone, which is, I would say, the most novel part of this of the system, is that you don't entrust someone to maintain a list of who owns what. And that's what those blockchains do. I can start with one of the very first users of blockchain, which I would say even predates Bitcoin, for example, which was timestamping and notarization. You want to prove that a document existed at a certain time. And you had a system, the Haber-Stonita system, that existed prior to that. There was a company called Guard Time doing this. So that's a form of blockchain. It's not as decentralized, it doesn't let you trade assets, but it has this ability of timestamping document, knowing that something happened at one time, notarization, verification. And that has found, there's been interest around the systems in supply chain applications, for example, this sort of things. Another use case is making decentralized money, making a form of money that no one controls, that is decentralized. Digital collectibles, that would be also one application. I can name a few more. I think you can build financial applications as well on top of a blockchain. So not only do you have money, but you can build programmable money. And so a lot of financial contracts can be seen as programmatically defined cash flows. That's what a lot of finance looks like. In some sense, it's saying like, well, I'm getting this money from this person for doing that, and you're getting this money. So let's, rearrange who's getting money when, in order to move around risk. That's what a lot of finance does, and you can do this programmatically on the chain, which lowers costs because it's automated, which lowers the amount of trust you need to extend to intermediaries. So that's another application. Typically, I think there are a lot of companies in this space that provide this type of services, like basic consulting services or integration services. So, through the grapevine, you would find someone who knows a little bit about that and say like, hey, can you recommend some consulting company or integration company that does this type of work? Maybe you've heard in the press that some, new startup raised money for doing ticketing on a blockchain. So you reach out to them and you say, hey, I'm interested in a blockchain. What can you do for my business? How can I get ticketing? And you get a conversation started this way. I mean, maybe they will, but not because somehow they don't embrace blockchain, but because the fact that they're not even trying is a reflection on the company culture, right? I'm not saying like, I wouldn't say that, oh, if you're a technical company and you don't use a blockchain, you're going to be left behind. No, I wouldn't say that. I think maybe it may be important, but but I would say if it's not in your culture to actually say like, hey, this looks interesting, let's try something, then maybe you get left behind because you don't have the right flexibility of looking at what's out there. So I think definitely everyone should experiment with it and should try and see if it works out for them. See what value prop there may be. But I don't want to be the doomsayer saying, oh my God, if you don't adopt blockchain, you're going to be replaced by a tiny smart contracts within 6 months. That's nonsense. But there's definitely a lot of opportunities, and I think people should explore them. So I'll take, for example, there's a contemporary artist I like a lot called Mario Kingleman. He goes under the pseudonym Quasimondo, and he's one of the first generative AI artists. So he was one of the first artists to work with artificial intelligence to produce pieces. And so it's a work between the artist and the algorithm, and him working on this at a deep level. And I've been a fan of his work for a long time. And his work is natively digital because it's being produced by an algorithm. So there's no physical artifact for it. And he started producing NFTs. So one of his NFT, what does it represent? Well, there's going to be an image, like a production that was made, and it could be any kind of media, but in general, it's often an image with a description and an entry in a ledger, in a Tezos ledger, saying, okay, this creation is owned by this person. That's the entry in the ledger. So what you're owning here, what you're controlling, you're not owning the image. In the same sense as when you buy a painting, you're not buying the IP of the painting or anything like that. You're buying creation. And so what you have is in some sense an ownership of a piece which has been validated, which has been sanctioned by the creator of the piece. That's what you're really getting. And we're getting back to the concept of ownership, which is, like I said, socially constructed. What does it mean to own, a piece of art? Well, if everyone agrees that you own it, you own it. And if everyone agrees that this representation, which was signed by the artist, which was put on a verifiable cryptographic ledger, represents the ownership of that piece, then you own it. That's what it means. If you look at the sports contracts today, they have very detailed clauses for who owns image rights, who gets the right to do this, who gets the right to do that, and they don't have NFT clauses because there's not such thing as an NFT. They are going forward, and so going forward is going to be very clear. Okay, if there's a picture taken of a special moment, that picture, if any NFT is made of this, belongs to that person, and so that person can legitimately make it. You have a bit of a void now in NFT is about legitimacy, right? I could buy, I can take the image, from the hand of God, and I can make an NFT out of it, and I can try to sell it, and no one's going to buy it from me, or at least they shouldn't, right? Because who am I, how am I to sell this? The question is, if Maradona, were to do this, does it, what does it mean? What if it's a club? What if it's a stadium? What if it's whoever had the image right? What if it's a photographer? It's a little bit murky because it's not necessarily obvious who has a legitimacy of basically tokenizing that moment or that image and saying to the public, okay, this is that moment, this is that image, and I am, I am conferring it to someone. So it's ambiguous. Just because in one case it's ambiguous doesn't mean it has to be ambiguous all the time. And I'm not privy to all the details of the deal with NBA and a platform like Top Shots, for example. But my understanding is that NBA has video rights. They're selling images of videos, and so it seems to be clear enough that they can do that. Why does it raise so much money? I think it's a combination of two things. One is there's genuine interest from collectors because it's new. These are not just, NFTs are important sport moments. These are also some of the first NFTs being made. So this is not just like, oh, this is an important moment in basketball. This is like, there's also an important moment in sports in general, because NFTs didn't really exist before. Plus, I think also like some of the marketing around them has been like pushing towards speculative fervor, which I think NFTs for sports are here to last, definitely, because collectibles have a very, very long history, and this is just an evolution of collectibles. I think the gigantic prices and the speculative fervor that we see today is not going to last, and I think that's healthy. I think the point of this is to be able, to connect the fans to this experience, and maybe you'll see like you see a baseball card or some card like this, being sold for large amounts once in a while. But it's not going to be this intense fervor that you see today. The question is like, okay, so let's say you have a moment in the NBA, and then one of the players just decide to create an NFT which doesn't have an image or doesn't even have a video attached to it, and just says, I'm tokenizing the moment where, I scored, this, I scored these points which let us win the game. There's no video, no image. Do they own it? What if like it also corresponds to another NFT? Again, I think ultimately that's going to be determined by collectors. Collectors are going to determine what they deem as valuable and what they deem as not valuable. One of the things that's common is that if you have, so in coin collecting, for example, if you have a misprint, that's more valuable. Why is it more valuable to have a misprint and not less valuable? Well, that's like, it's just general agreement. It's just general consensus that if there's a misprint and it's more rare, it's more valuable. So is it more valuable if it's like the player just like mints an NFT and say, that's my moment and that's when I did this? Is it like more legitimate if the team does it? If the IP rights holder of whatever accompanying video exists does it? That ultimately is going to be determined by collectors. And not by any type of agreement, I think. So I'm on the board of a nonprofit called the Tezos Foundation, which is a Swiss nonprofit, which helps the Tezos ecosystem. We give out grants to different players in the Tezos ecosystem, and we were approached by Red Bull Racing, which was interested in creating NFTs and having a platform to put their NFTs upon, and so we proposed Tezos, and a partnership was born out of that. So essentially, what they're looking to do is tokenizing in the form of NFTs some important events or images or anything that's I would say relevant to their fan base with respect to their competing in a Grand Prix. We are basically acting as a technical partner, so helping them navigate the environment of blockchains, NFTs, and all that. But of course, ultimately, they're the one who knows their fan base. They're the one who knows their audience. They're the one who know, the type of NFTs that their fans want to collect. So anything that has to do with the creative process, of course, that's all theirs. Yeah, that's a great point. And I don't think we know, and we're about to find out. One thing that's interesting is it still images? Is what's more valuable? Things that happened. So you have like a video of something that happened. Is it about the players or the athletes? Who are involved with the drivers in the case, of course, of F1. Is it about the victories? It's not clear, but people are going to figure it out quite quickly, I think, because we're going to have NFTs of everything, and then we're going to be able to say like, look, like 1 year, 2 years down the line, we'll say like, all right, this is what collectors actually want and care about. That's entirely up to them. So if they want to go very, very, very quickly to market, they can do that. But they can also decide, no, we want to take our time to look at the market, decide exactly what kind of NFT we want, how we want to sell them, and do all that. So it's it's a trade-off between how quick you want to be and how detailed you want to be in your execution plan. I mean, if you really want to rush to market, you can rush to market and do it in 24 hours. You might not want to, but you can if the only thing that matters is time, right? You can do it, but it won't be high quality. Like you can do something low quality in 24 hours. You can do something high quality in 2 years. You probably don't want to do it in 24 hours. You probably don't want to do it in 2 years, right? So like how long you actually take is a business decision. Yeah. And what I find really interesting is that the NFT itself is not the image. The NFT itself is not the video. The NFT is just the ownership of something, and what I see, the image and the video is they're just a representation of the NFT. But people care about this representation. If you had a pure abstract NFT that doesn't have any accompanying media, I don't think it would be very attractive, right? And so you want to have attractive media that accompany the NFT. I mean, that's how I think about it. You're not buying the image, you're buying the NFT, and the image is a representation of what you bought. I'll name a few. One of the things is, Tezos is quite energy efficient as a network to operate. If you look at the energy cost of operating the Tezos network, it's about 2 million times less than the energy cost of operating the Ethereum network. And there was a lot of pushback earlier this year against NFTs by the art community by saying, look, people are making all these NFTs on Ethereum, but there's a huge environmental impact because they're consuming so much energy. And so there was pushback, and the pushback was not against Ethereum, the pushback was against NFTs in general. NFTs are bad for the environment. And we did an education campaign showing wait a second, there's nothing bad for the environment about NFTs. It depends on what chain they're on. And if you're doing it on Tezos, the energy cost of minting an NFT is less than the cost of a tweet, right? So not every chain is very, very energy intensive, and I think it's become a very important criterion for people to create NFTs that they are based on chains which use technology which are not which don't consume large amount of energy, which is the case for Tezos, which is a proof of stake chain as opposed to proof of work. So that's one criterion. The other criterion is that, why have NFTs on a blockchain as opposed to a database? Why not just say we're Red Bull Racing, we'll run our database of NFTs and we'll just keep it on a website and say who owns what. And that goes to longevity. In some sense, maybe this database will crash, maybe it will go missing, maybe they'll change it one way or another. You don't really get a sense of ownership if what you have is just on the database of one corporation. If it's on a decentralized system that's censorship resistant, that's built to last for hundreds of years, that's a very, very different feeling of ownership that you get. Again, the first question you asked me is the best question of all this because it really gets down to the root of this. What is it to own something? And for digital assets, there's far more of a sense and substance of ownership when it's on a decentralized blockchain. So, Tezos was proof of stake, and also it is widely decentralized. And so being at the intersection of these two things makes it a very attractive platform for NFTs. I think the sport franchises who do the best with NFTs are those who think about it as a way to connect with their audience first, and as a method for monetization second. If you think about it as a way to connect with your audience, monetization will come one way or another. If you think about it primarily as monetization, there's a risk that you get something that's really extractive. And there's a saying in the UK, you can only sell the family silver once. And in some sense, if you're trying to be too monetization focused, you're going to extract a lot from your audience. You're going to be disappointed and you're going to lose fans. So that's not what you want. Focus on fan engagement first and foremost. I think the future is not a few NFTs being sold for millions of dollars. It's millions of NFTs being sold, for $5 or $10, and being growing up and being a super fan of a team and being able to own a piece of that. That I think has far more of a future.